Hello, all, and welcome to Frame by Frame, where we take a closer look at iconic film scenes. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
In this episode, we will be discussing the nightclub fight scene from Monkey Man. If you want to watch this scene, we've included a link to the scene in our show notes so you can experience this scene before we dive in and talk about it in a little bit more detail. So, Sarah, what happens in this scene?
In this scene, Kid makes his way through the nightclub. So we start in the kitchen, have a little fight there, make our way into an elevator, there's a little fight there, make our way into the ballroom, and a lot happens in that ballroom. So we're just seeing Kid making his way through this building before he gets to the big boss. But we stop at the end of that ballroom scene.
Yes, indeed. All right. A lot of fights packed into this short 5 to 6 minute sequence. So, Sarah, I'm curious to know what makes this scene from Monkey Man iconic to you?
Okay, so this scene from Monkey Man is iconic to me for a really weird reason.
Okay. I'm
I
ready.
tend to focus on like weird little details, and I can like hyperfixate on things. And this is one of those scenes when I did that. And the reason why this scene is iconic to me is because of just the sound editing and the sound design. There are so many action films that are really heavy on like guns and explosions, and a lot of them sound very similar. And the fights in Monkey Man sound completely different. And the sound changes based on what room they're in, based on what weapons or improvised weapons they have that are accessible. And one of my favorite moments in this scene is somebody grabs, I think it's like a chair leg, and uses that as a weapon. And the thunk that comes from that chair leg is just so satisfying to me. It's a very weird thing to fixate on. But I remember watching the scene in the theaters and being like, oh my gosh, that was literally perfect. I was here for that chair leg weapon. So yeah, the sound design in this just makes this scene iconic to me. So what about you, Jen? What about this scene from Monkey Man is so iconic to you?
Yeah, when I think back to the scene, what I remember being so thrilling to see is when the women show up towards the end of the scene in their traditional garb, and they are fighting with these like glittering traditional outfits. And the film is also so captivated by this too, because there are so many shots of this kind of haze of sparkles and glittering hanging pieces off of these dresses moving, and we are almost like intoxicated by it. And in such a gritty action film, it was mind-blowing and exciting to see this. And I think it's a great example of the way that Monkey Man in general as a film is not just any action film, but is really marrying together, obviously, those big action set pieces, but also deeply meaningful because it is rooted in the cultural context of the relationship dynamics throughout this film. And I feel like that is an example of how bringing together big, flashy, spicy action sequences with these cultural iconography and the dresses being put into this environment is just something that has never been seen before. And I think clearly a vision that Dev Patel has for making this movie in such a established genre. So that specific visual is something that I remember watching in this film, feeling that sensation of, oh my gosh, I've never seen anything like this before. And movies have been around for like decades and decades. We've seen a gajillion action films, and to still have that thrill and excitement of going, I've never seen anything like this before in an action movie, it's just an exciting, special feeling. So that in particular was incredibly memorable and iconic from this scene for me.
And I love that moment too, because there's these slow motion shots of their dresses twirling around as they're taking out all these dudes. And it's such a fun juxtaposition because we've seen so many like quick cuts and there are these like really intense, fights, and it's all of this like really fast paced, fast moving everything. And then it cuts to these like slow-mo shots of this this fabric twirling and the way that the glitter catches the light. And it's just such an interesting way to cut those shots in the midst of all of the chaos and the mayhem of all of these fight sequences. It's such an interesting juxtaposition, and it's almost this moment of beauty amidst the blood and the violence. And I found that pairing to be really intriguing.
Yeah, that's so true. And then to your point around the sound design and the score, specifically in this sequence, we actually get the more instrumental, more traditional sounding score in the previous sequence when the men are just fighting each other. But I love that when the women show up in these stunning traditional dresses, the score is this gritty, heavy metal, incredibly thrilling sequence. And so that contrast and that way that plays with our expectations, I think is really fun as well. So yes, we are intoxicated, and it's slow moving with the glitter as it moves past in sequence in the scene, but also don't be fooled, because these women are taking people out and they are highly effective at it. And that was really fun to watch as a woman watching this action sequence.
And I love how the score and the song choice changes in each location, because it's different in the kitchen, then it changes when he gets into the elevator, then it changes when they first come into the ballroom, and then once all of the women arrive, then there's a different song as well. And I thought that was such a neat way to show almost like these different stages of this fight as Kid is progressing to the next level. You get a different song with each new level that he enters on this fight. And so, yeah, it's like one continuous fight that he is on, but he is progressing each time. And the music and obviously the visuals help capture that sense of momentum and progress as he is ultimately working his way up into the top floor of the building.
Yeah. The contrast in score so quickly tonally was notable, particularly in the second watch of the scene. We go from like a really fun, like upbeat, honestly, like silly, almost silly sounding score in the elevator scene when he's taking some men out. And then in the fight in the club, when he first enters the ballroom, it's instrumental and almost airy and melancholy is the feeling that I was getting as he's, violently taking out these men and you see them fighting each other. And someone's just like, what are we doing here, guys? And then when the women show up, it's like, no, but we got a mission to accomplish. So let's freaking go. And so the tonal shifts are so big and so jarring and so contrasting that it really keeps you on your toes. You never know what to expect. And I think that's something that can sometimes happen in action films in general, is that the law of diminishing return is very much present, where like you start with a big splashy sequence and it's fun at the beginning, but by the end you're just like, I'm tired. Like this feels like we're just slogging through these violent sequences and the adrenaline is waning. And the score helps keep every fight sequence that's part of this larger scene really sharp and really punchy and really exciting. And so that momentum is definitely really helpful, because there's a lot of fighting. And if I think they had kept one score throughout, we'd by the end be like, okay, I'm done. I'm ready to go take a nap now and rest. And if anything, I think keeping us on our toes in this way keeps it fresh, keeps it exciting.
And I think the sense of place also helps make it feel fresh and exciting too, because he's also just not moving through different rooms that are on the same floor. He is going up each time. And I think
that's good.
It's such an interesting little detail, but it weirdly helps, at least for me, feel like we're making additional progress because he's gaining height, he's going up floors. And so I think that that's also a really helpful detail. Also, just the inclusion of an elevator fight scene is excellent because it's so cramped and you can feel how cramped and chaotic it is as he's trying to take out these dudes in this like tiny little elevator, and then the camera work mirrors all of that as well. So I think the visual contrast as he's moving in and out of rooms and onto different floors helps keep you engaged as he's just taken out everybody that he can set eyes on, basically.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's so true. And I think the other thing that I want to shout out in this film, and it really shines in that elevator fight sequence, is how much work and effort it takes for them to have filmed so many of these fight sequences that are quite long with one shot. A lot of times, especially in the kitchen fight sequence and then the elevator fight sequence, they're actually only cutting between the action. But when the action is happening, the camera is filming everything with one shot. And the amount of staging and blocking and choreography that needs to be executed with such precision also aligned to how the camera is moving, because the camera is very active as well and shifting and moving constantly. All of the choreography of that has to be so precise to execute it with such adrenaline as it is filmed to be. And so, one, the decision to do that, but then two, the work it takes to execute on that, I think really shines through. And we talk about this a ton, but action films often fall into the understandable realm of a lot of fast cuts because it's really hard to film the action sequence. And cutting helps break up the visuals. It helps make it easier to show certain choreography, certain shots, certain movement. But to do it in one continuous take is a lot more challenging. And Monkey Man, as a film in general, is committed to that execution and to that level of quality. And I think we get to see a microcosm of it in this one sequence as well, particularly notable in the kitchen fight sequence and the elevator scene. Like, I was like, they have not cut at all. And it's been minutes of time and so much is happening. And yet it's able to capture it all with such precision.
Yeah, I loved that kitchen scene and how we start out behind Kid as he's walking in, and we're able to like see everything he's doing, and then the camera eventually turns so that we're able to see his face as he's fighting these dudes. And even when there's a moment when he like throws a dude to the ground, and it's like this very violent, abrupt hit on this dude's face slamming into the ground, and the camera just perfectly follows it, and the camera movement almost makes it feel more jarring. So I to your point, I love how the fight choreography and then the cinematography perfectly pair with each other, and it almost feels like this dance that the performers are doing with the camera. And I mean, just echoing everything you just said about the amount of time and skill and intentionality that it takes to do something like that, and it absolutely pays off in the visuals. There's a reason why that kitchen scene is like a minute long, but you can watch that over and over and over again and discover new things that are happening in that scene, because there's just so much that happens so rapidly. So it's just such a great example of a top-notch kitchen fight scene. And I think a lot of it has to do with that beautiful pairing of fight choreography and then beautiful camera movement.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I think you bring a really good point about how much the camera adds a lot to those long take fight sequences, because sometimes we've seen in films the camera is panning around the fight choreo, but the camera is quite still. It's either moving along one plane or it is truly still to really showcase the choreography that's being displayed. I think like John Wick in particular does a lot of this. Like the camera is a little bit more still. In Monkey Man, the camera is being like whipped left and right, and we are almost moving as a limb attached to some of the characters that we're watching on screen. As they're getting whipped around, the camera's getting whipped with it. And so that extra amount of dynamic camera movement, I think, is also notable and unique from some of the other times. Even when we say that it's a long take and we get to see all the choreo on display, the camera's still kind of far back and maybe a little bit more angled on one plane. In this, the camera's up close and then it's wide and then it's constantly changing. And so the dynamic nature of the camera, I think, adds a lot. And the movement of the camera, like you mentioned, the way that it bumps up against the floor while still filming to kind of simulate the feeling of this man's head smacking against the ground is some genius way to make this feel like a visceral experience for us.
And it's not too much. I feel like
Yeah.
sometimes when I watch action movies, there are sometimes when I have to like
Dizzy.
close my eyes because I get dizzy. Like
Yeah.
it's wild. If there's like too much camera movement, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not it, y'all. But I don't feel that with Monkey Man. It's so interesting. It's just enough movement to keep that momentum going, but it's not too much that you start to feel seasick while watching.
Yeah.
It's that perfect balance that they managed to achieve.
Yeah. No, that's so true. That's so true. It's so funny. I feel like we're like buzzing from adrenaline from just even talking about this scene as if we're there experiencing all of the visceral chaos that was ensuing. But yeah, this was awesome.
Mm-hmm. Oh, such a good scene. This is just a great film. And then this scene is so much fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. This scene is such a great example of like what this film does well in all of its major pillars. So go watch Monkey Man and then go listen to our episode where we talk about Monkey Man and kind of dive more deeply into the whole film. There's so much more in the storyline and the plot that is so rich too. So anyway, in the meantime, though, this was our scene breakdown of the nightclub fight scene from Monkey Man. Thank you for listening to this episode of Frame by Frame. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune to your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review, letting us know your thoughts about this scene and maybe Monkey Man in general as a film as a whole. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at MoviesAndUsPod or email us at moviesanduspod@gmail.com. Keep an eye on this feed because we will surely be back very soon with a Movies and Us film review. We hope you have an amazing week and we'll talk again with y'all very soon.